The Distorted Reality Show. Chapter 1, The Selection. Katie could barely contain her excitement as she sat in the sterile white waiting room, surrounded by dozens of other hopefuls. Today was the day her dreams could come true, the chance to be selected for Unreal World, the hottest new reality show on TV. Katie smoothed down her dress and went over her answers in her head. She had been preparing for this audition for weeks. The application had asked for her most embarrassing moment, her wildest fantasy, and her deepest fears. Katie wondered what kinds of questions the producers would ask and how far she would go to get on the show. She looked around at the other candidates. Some seemed anxious, fidgeting in their seats. Others looked bored, playing on their phones. A few competitors eyed each other suspiciously, sizing up the competition. A young man paced back and forth, mumbling to himself as he read over his application crumpled in his hand. An edgy girl with piercings and tattoos rocked out to music blaring from her headphones. Katie noticed a camera on the wall tracking their movements. Were they already being filmed for test footage? She sat up straight and tried to appear confident. A producer emerged from the audition room and called Katie's name. Taking a deep breath, she followed him inside the stark room. Two expressionless judges sat behind a table staring her down. The questions were even more probing than she expected, asking about her relationship history, whether she's ever stolen anything, and if she would ever consider doing porn. The grilling went on for over an hour until Katie thought she would crack. Finally, the judges put down their notes. "We'll let you know our decision soon," they said curtly. Katie walked out, feeling drained but hoping she made a good impression. Over the next week, she agonized over whether the call would come. Then one day, her phone rang. She had been selected as a contestant on Unreal World. Katie couldn't believe her wild dream was coming true. She was ready to do whatever it takes to win. Chapter 2, Welcome to the Unreal World. Katie could hardly contain her excitement as the black SUV approached a large modern compound in a remote desert area. This was it, the Unreal World house where she would be. Living with strangers and competing in crazy challenges, all for a shot at winning $1 million. As Katie got out, she saw the other contestants gazing up at the house in awe. The sleek, futuristic building looked like something out of a movie set. They were greeted by the cheerful host who gave them a tour of the high-tech house. It had state-of-the-art amenities, a luxurious kitchen, a pool with a waterfall, a home theater, and a 2-story gym. Each contestant got their own stylishly furnished bedroom with lush beds and views of the desert landscape from floor-to-ceiling windows. The last stop on the tour was a room lined wall-to-wall with display screens. The host explained this was the nerve center where contests are controlled and monitored 24/7. Katie felt a prickle of unease seeing the towering wall of screens, but then shrugged it off. After the tour, the contestants gathered to meet and size each other up. Among them was Brad, a cocky fitness model, Simone, a quirky artist, Vince, a wealthy entrepreneur, and Isabella, a cutthroat attorney. There were also fraternal twins, Chris and Sam, who had a bizarre psychic connection. On the first night, the contestants chose their beds and started bonding over drinks. Katie was enjoying herself until the lights suddenly cut out for a few eerie seconds. A strange electrical hum echoed through the silent house before the lights flickered back on. Katie laughed it off nervously, but had a creeping sense things weren't completely normal here. Chapter 3, Settling In. Over the next few days, the contestants fell into a routine in the Unreal World house. They were kept busy with physical training, strategy sessions, and getting to know one another better. Katie was making friends, especially with Sam, who she learned was a computer programmer. They bonded over being some of the more introverted contestants, observing the louder personalities like Brad and Isabella fight for attention. The first week's competition was boys versus girls in an obstacle course requiring teams to balance, climb, swim and more. The girls narrowly lost after Isabella slowed them down, much to her fury. At night, the contestants unwound with hot tub parties or movie screenings. One night, Katie joined Sam, Chris and a few others watching a horror movie. Right as the axe murderer jumped out for a predictable scare, the speakers suddenly blared deafening metal music. Everyone freaked until the sound stopped as abruptly as it began. Katie noticed cameras turning away and producers looking annoyed. What was that about? She whispered to Sam. He shrugged, but shot Chris a strange look. Later that week, Sam confided to Katie that Chris had intense nightmares every night. He would wake up muttering about things moving in the house. Katie brushed it off as harmless sleepwalking. But deep down, she had an unsettled feeling this place had some bad vibes. The next day, Katie stumbled onto a glitchy screen in the nerve center. For a split second, instead of contestants by the pool, it showed an empty, run-down swimming pool full of leaves. But when Katie looked again, the image was normal. Katie shook her head, laughing at herself for being paranoid. After all, this was the unreal world, nothing here was exactly as it seemed. Chapter 4, First Challenges. Welcome to your first official competition, the host announced. The 14 contestants gathered in the barren desert outside the Unreal World house. Large structures were set up, looking like something out of a circus. Each of you will take turns going through this extreme obstacle course, the host explained, pointing to twisting tunnels, ropes, balance beams, and bizarre angled stairs. You will be judged on your time and number of fails. The top 3 fastest will win immunity from elimination this week. As the contestants sized up the course, there was shoving and trash talk. Vince scoffed that this would be child's play for him. Isabella vowed to secure immunity and rubbed it in Brad's face that she would beat him. When Katie's turn came, she took a deep breath and started into the dizzying maze. She hit a few snags, like the balance beam spaced unpredictably far apart. But she completed the course faster than she expected. Sam impressed everyone with his quick reflexes and computer-like analysis of the best routes. But Vince blazed through the course fastest thanks to his physical prowess. The last contestant was Charles, an older dad type competing for his family. But he became disoriented and panicked in the confinement of the tunnels. As he curled up and shut down, producers had to retrieve him. "I'm sorry, Charles, but you have been medically disqualified from continuing," the host announced ominously. As a shaken Charles was escorted out, Katie realized that any one of them could be gone in an instant. She knew she needed to get tougher mentally and physically to survive in the increasingly intense challenges of this unreal world. The real game was only just beginning. Chapter 5, Simmering Tensions. A week into the competition, cracks were starting to form in the Unreal World house. Personality clashes were erupting among the super-competitive contestants vying for the prize. Katie noticed Brad bullying some of the weaker guys, especially Sam. During a heated pool hall game, Brad kept trash-talking and making impossible shots to embarrass Sam. "Leave him alone," Katie finally snapped at Brad. "Ah, look who's got a little crush on the dork here," Brad sneered. Katie blushed furiously, which made Brad laugh. "How about you hang with a real man instead?" Brad said with a cocky grin. Fuming, Katie just walked away. Meanwhile, the mean girl Isabella was also stirring up trouble. She caught Chris alone in the pantry and taunted him about his freaky twin psychic powers until he fled. Things came to a head during the Hunger Games challenge, where contestants had to hunt and cook food. Back at the house, Isabella accused Chris of cheating by taking extra ingredients. The argument escalated until Isabella shoved Chris, shocking everyone. After Chris stormed off, Katie turned on Isabella. You didn't have to push him, that was too far. Isabella just rolled her eyes and walked away. That night, Katie asked Chris if he was okay. Chris said he had a bad vibe that someone was trying to get inside his head during the challenge. Katie wondered if Chris was just paranoid or if something more sinister was escalating the tensions in the house. Either way, she knew they all had to be careful. With mistrust running high and egos on edge, things could soon spin dangerously out of control. Chapter 6: The Twists Begin. After a week of physical challenges, the producers announced a twist: that night's competition would mess with their minds. The contestants were brought into a room with a long table topped with elaborate place settings and culinary delicacies. For tonight's challenge, you must eat everything in your place setting, no matter how bizarre, the host revealed. Katie examined her plate to find insects, animal organs, and unidentifiable slimy things. She cringed but steeled herself to digest the disgusting feast. Most contestants choked their way through the grotesque dishes with watering eyes and gagging. But Vince plowed through with gusto, earning impressed looks. Things got stranger when the hosts brought out living creatures for the next course. As everyone recoiled, Vince grabbed the writhing octopus and bit into it triumphantly. Finally, it was down to Katie and Vince. For the last item, Katie froze, seeing a beating heart in front of her. As she hesitated, Vince grabbed it and swallowed it whole, winning the challenge. "You are all safe from elimination," the host announced. That was just a taste of the twists and tricks to come. Back at the house, shaken contestants tried to regain their composure. Katie overheard Chris telling Sam that during the challenge, the walls seemed to melt and reform for a second. Sam looked at him with concern. Katie's stomach turned as she remembered the odd flicker she noticed in the nerve center screen. Were her own eyes playing tricks on her in this strange place? Or was something more twisted and sinister invading this unreal world? Chapter 7: Fear Factor. The next week's challenges brought a new twisted theme: facing your worst fears. First, contestants were locked in coffins underground with limited air. Vince nearly lost it as his biggest fear was confinement. Next, they were abandoned in the woods at night. Timid Jenny had a meltdown, crying and clawing the ground in terror. Before the final test, the host gathered everyone. Today you will confront your personal phobias based on the fears revealed in your applications. Contestants were put in small rooms rigged with each person's unique fear. Katie was paralyzed to find herself surrounded by menacing dogs growling and snapping at her. Sam nearly jumped out of his skin when the windows and doors vanished, trapping him in walls that seemed to close in. Only Isabella emerged unfazed by being covered in cockroaches. "Guess my application lied about my fears," she shrugged. That night, Katie asked Chris if he sensed anything strange during the challenge. Chris hesitated before replying. "I felt for a moment like someone was inside my head, poking around," he said with a haunted look. Katie felt a chill down her spine. She wrote off bug hallucinations, but having your mind invaded? What was this place doing to them? Were the producers just master manipulators, or something more malevolent? Either way, with weaknesses exposed and paranoia rising, it seemed everyone was becoming unhinged. Katie knew she had to stay alert and keep an eye on the unraveling contestants around her. Chapter 8: Descent into Paranoia. An air of paranoia permeated the unreal world house. Contestants became convinced the game was rigged and someone was sabotaging them. Vince was certain Sam hacked into the computer system to alter contestant scores and make Vince lose. In retaliation, he destroyed Sam's laptop and got in his face threateningly. Jenny had a meltdown and accused the producers of hiding cameras and microphones in the showers to violate their privacy. She ransacked her room, ripping down lights and mirrors to find proof. Even Katie found herself analyzing every occurrence with suspicion after her things kept disappearing. She wondered if the producers were gaslighting her or if a contestant had turned on her. Emotions finally erupted at the nomination ceremony when contestants voted to eliminate each other. Vince and Sam's feud exploded with screaming accusations of cheating. Isabella stirred up drama by insinuating Katie and Chris were in a secret alliance due to their weird bond. Katie was shocked at her backstabbing lies. That night, Katie lay awake with spiraling doubts. She noticed Chris pacing the halls, looking more unhinged than ever. Where was Sam anyway? Katie realized she hadn't seen him for hours. Katie overheard Chris muttering that he was under attack. She tried to calm him down, but he seemed detached from reality. Just then blood-curdling screams rang out. Katie and Chris rushed to find Sam curled up in a hall, clutching his head babbling about monsters trying to steal his thoughts. Seeing Sam's frightening breakdown made Katie's blood turn cold. What terrified her most was no longer the rigged challenges or backstabbing contestants, it was realizing this place was slowly driving them all insane. Chapter 9, Fracturing Alliances. In the aftermath of Sam's breakdown, all trust had evaporated between contestants. It was everyone for themselves now. Katie constantly felt watched, even catching Isabella rifling through her room. "Just looking for my earrings," Isabella said innocently before walking away. Vince seemed to be having volatile arguments with himself when he thought no one was around. Katie noticed his pupils were dilated and wondered if he was taking something illicit. With the twins estranged after Vince's destruction of Sam's laptop, Chris was spiraling alone. Katie caught him desperately trying to call his mother before producers snatched away his phone. When Jenny had another freakout and locked herself in the pantry, most just ignored her wailing and banging. "If she misses elimination, not our problem," Brad laughed cruelly. Things reached a tipping point during the Survive the Night challenge where contestants were abandoned in the desert until dawn. They were monitored by CCTV and had to flag down cameras to avoid disqualification if in distress. That night, Katie watched in disbelief as Brad snuck around sabotaging the other contestants by moving their flags out of camera view. "I'm playing this game my way. No one said anything about helping these losers survive," he sneered when Katie confronted him. Horrified at his sociopathic manipulation, Katie knew not even alliances mattered anymore. She had to harden her heart and be willing to betray others too if she wanted to win this twisted game. Chapter 10, Psychological Breaking Points. The high-pressure environment continued to fracture the contestants' sanity. Soon, more than just Sam were exhibiting strange behavior. One day the kitchen was found in shambles, food, dishes and furniture strewn everywhere. Timid Amy finally confessed she just snapped. During a challenge briefing, Jenny started babbling angrily at producers before being escorted out and sedated by medics. Katie noticed Vince's appearance becoming increasingly disheveled, with bizarre tattoos he didn't have before. He stopped making sense, muttering about receiving messages in lights and codes. Even carefree comedian Dave had a sobbing meltdown out of nowhere, screaming he couldn't make it stop. He had to be restrained after punching cameras. Katie was disturbed to witness their crumbling minds. She decided to reach out to Chris since the twins seemed to have some kind of sixth sense in this place. She found Chris curled up and shaking in a dark closet. "Katie. You shouldn't be here, they'll see you talking to me," he whispered in a panicked voice. He refused to leave the closet, crying about things seizing his mind and a dark presence surrounding him. Katie reluctantly left Chris, not sure how to help him. Immunity challenges continued, but contestants now moved in a dysfunctional daze. Some wandered around like ghosts, seemingly lost in vivid hallucinations. Watching her fellow competitors and friends psychologically break down one by one was taking its toll on Katie. How much longer could she last before she lost her mind too? Chapter 11, Rise of Suspicions. As breakdowns mounted, a 21st century headache pounded in Katie's skull. Something was very wrong here. Contestants don't just stumble into mass hysteria unprompted. Katie's observations evolved into theories. Were they being drugged? Poisoned? Was this a twisted psychological study? Or some elaborate prank at their expense? Her focus pulled to the nerve center. What was the grand sum of the camera feeds and biometrics being aggregated within? Were they just monitoring contestants' safety or conditioning their behavior? One night, Katie snuck into the hub of operations, her senses electrified. Banks of computers hummed with artificial purpose. Katie ran her fingers across a console of knobs and wires. Turning, she came face to face with her thermal form on a wall of surveillance screens. A map. This was a sick social schematic to manipulate vulnerabilities and track how they break. Footsteps echoed from the hall. Katie's eyes darted around the shadowy room looking for answers before she slipped out. Katie quickened her pace, confronting Brad. "Where are you going?" Brad asked with a viper's smile. "We're just having a little fun, don't spoil our good time." Katie shoved past Brad. Fun for who? Were there any real relationships or just coerced bonds engineered to heighten the lab mice's stress response before disposing of them? Katie knew one thing: this was not reality. She had to cling to that fact no matter how convincingly the fantasies pulled at her senses. But what was the path back to truth? First, she had to warn the others before their dreams turned on them. Chapter 12, The Setup is Revealed. Katie decided it was time to blow the lid off this twisted game. She gathered the remaining lucid contestants and revealed what she uncovered about their imprisonment and manipulation. "We're just lab rats to them," she urged. "They've been using surveillance, psychological tactics, and maybe even drugs to control us. We have to band together and break out of their grip." Some contestants reacted with disbelief and paranoia, but a few like Sam seemed convinced. "It explains everything weird I've noticed with the tech here. I think I can hack into their systems to find a way out," he said. While investigating the nerve center, Sam triggered a video file that glitched onto screens throughout the house. They watched in horror as a scientist explained the true purpose of the experiment and how the compound was built to stimulate phobias and model human breaking points. "We have to get word out about this to the outside world," Katie said. "They can't keep exploiting us like lab animals." When the producers realized their secret was exposed, an emergency evacuation alarm blared. Contestants fled outside to find the compound in the middle of a barren desert valley, mountains lining the perimeter. A frantic producer tried convincing them it was part of the show, but no one was buying it anymore. "It's over, your sick game ends now," Katie yelled as they surrounded the panicked puppet masters. Chapter 13, The Failsafe. Now aware of the true sinister nature of the compound, the contestants searched frantically for a way out. While exploring for vulnerabilities, Chris stumbled upon a hidden door. Inside was a small room with security monitors showing the truth, run-down living quarters, a grimy kitchen, and contestants looking drained and confused as they aimlessly wandered the bare rooms under watch. On shaky legs, Chris called everyone over to witness the biggest twist of all: the pristine compound they inhabited was nothing but a carefully constructed mirage. Katie's head was spinning. "They must have us drugged or under hypnosis to make us believe we're somewhere else," she said. Sam pointed to the security system specs. "This is feeding a false reality loop to our minds. If I can hack the failsafe, maybe I can wake us up." After bypassing firewalls, Sam triggered the emergency override. For a moment, the illusion flickered off, revealing the depressing truth. Excited, the contestants rushed to escape their cells but were stopped short by a lockdown. The failsafe had tipped off the doctors monitoring them. Katie's hopes sank seeing the scientists' smug faces outside the cell. This evil ruse went deeper than she imagined. Still, now they had proof and a clue to breaking free for real. Katie helped a trembling Chris up. "We know they're manipulating our reality. We have to keep fighting even if we doubt our own senses," she urged. Chris nodded, a new determination on his face. United with this truth, the contestants vowed to hold on to their sanity and find a way back to the real world. Chapter 14, Fighting Back. Now that the contestants knew the truth, they were determined to resist the compound's psychological manipulations. Sam worked feverishly to hack back into the security systems to find their physical location. Meanwhile, the others practiced techniques to ground themselves in reality when the illusions took hold. During an illusion where the walls appeared to melt, Katie recited facts she knew like her childhood street address. She also tried painful sensations like biting her tongue to jolt herself back. To disrupt surveillance, they pretended to still be under the illusion and sabotaged cameras when they could. Chris and Sam used their psychic connection to communicate without being overheard. Whenever the scientists adjusted drugs to deepen the hallucinations, the contestants would take turns feigning breakdowns to get access to medical supplies. They pocketed sedatives to build up an arsenal to use against their captors when the time was right. Soon the scientists grew frustrated that their control methods were proving ineffective. "We'll have to use more extreme measures to regain order," Katie overheard. She knew they didn't have much time before the scientists resorted to cruelty to force obedience. During their next illusion immersion, Sam intercepted a security code that gave him access to the door locks. Their plan was in motion to soon turn the tables on their captors. The scientists had no idea of the forces they had unleashed by pushing the contestants to the brink. Now the uprising was coming. Chapter 15, Outsmarting the Game. Tonight was the night the contestants would execute their plan to escape. They knew failure could mean torture, but staying was a fate worse than death. When the latest disorienting illusion began, everyone played their parts convincingly for the cameras. Meanwhile, Chris used their psychic link to coordinate with Sam to unlock the doors. Once Chris signaled the doors were unlocked, the group dropped all pretense and made a run for it. They overpowered the guards using homemade pepper spray bombs. Alarms blared deafeningly as they fought their way through the sterile maze of halls. Katie led the navigation using the map she memorized from the control room. Right and left they turned, fleeing the illusion that had nearly shattered their minds. They avoided the oblivious doctors, focused only on the promised freedom ahead. Finally, they turned the last corner and could see outside. The exit was just ahead when Katie skidded to a halt. The others crashed into her from behind. Before them was only endless white space, no outdoors in sight. "We're still deep in the illusion," Katie realized with despair. But they had come too far to surrender now. Regrouping, they retreated to find the reality buried somewhere in this mind trap threatening their sanity. The contestants knew the mad doctors had only won this round. Outsmarting them next time could be their only way out of this distortion forever. Chapter 16, Escape Attempts. After their failed escape, the contestants refused to abandon hope. Katie could see the toll the endless illusions were taking, with more vacant stares and unpredictable outbursts. They had to keep trying before the group fractured completely. Vince devised an idea to fashion a rope using bed sheets and climb down from a balcony. In the night, he descended recklessly only to lose his grip and plummet. His screams echoed until an awful silence followed. When Jenny thought she spotted an unguarded exit, she made a mad dash towards freedom. But she only found herself lost and disoriented before crumpling into sobs. After Vince's deadly fall, Katie was hesitant to try again so soon. But Chris and Sam seemed newly galvanized, working feverishly on a plan. They had discovered a large ventilation shaft that could provide a way out if they could break through the Great Seal. The next illusion cycle, the two brothers sprang into action. Using all their strength, they shattered the metal grill before crawling into the tight airshaft. Heart pounding, Katie waited to hear that they had succeeded. But after 20 minutes of silence, she heard anguished screams approaching. The twins crawled back out bloodied and dazed, with no idea how they ended back at the beginning. Shaking her head bitterly, Katie knew the puppet masters would never make escape that easy. Out of the maze, into the maze, it was designed to be inescapable. But for her own sanity, Katie had to keep believing there was a way out somewhere. Chapter 17, Punishment. After the failed escape attempts, the scientists retaliated with harsher punishments to torment the defiant contestants back into submission. Katie was thrown into solitary confinement with only maddening white noise blaring as company. She lost track of time, unsure if minutes or hours were passing. Others were subjected to interrogation under blinding lights for hours on end. Isabella emerged sobbing and disoriented, refusing to speak at all. The most horrific was the scientists leveraging contestants' worst fears against them. Vince nearly went into shock when scientists locked him into a tiny box and buried him alive. Katie's heart broke watching gentle Amy undergo exposure therapy for her phobia of the dark. Scientists forced her into the pitch-black crawlspace for hours until she lost her voice from screaming and hyperventilating. The cruel punishments crushed the contestants' will to resist. Katie's strength was sapped, being deprived of sleep for days until she hallucinated endlessly. In desperation, Katie whispered to Sam that she would rather die than endure these torments. Sam squeezed her hand in shared pain and whispered, "Don't let them defeat you. Our minds are still free." Katie nodded, steeling herself. She refused to let this evil place claim her sanity and soul. The punishments were only strengthening the contestants' bond and resolve. Their captors may control this distorted place, but they couldn't conquer Katie's inner freedom and humanity. Chapter 18, Questioning Reality. As time dragged on with no grasp on the real world, Katie's sense of reality became untethered. She constantly doubted her surroundings and perceptions. Hallucinations that once seemed shocking now blended seamlessly with any lucid moments. Katie realized she had no concrete anchor, no way to prove her memories weren't just implanted fantasies. Maybe she had been trapped here far longer than she realized, years even. Or perhaps she was never real at all. Maybe she was just a character in some sadistic science fiction. Non-existence seemed like it could be a blissful relief. Whenever Katie spiraled into existential crisis, Sam was there to care for her. "I know you feel unmoored, but you're real and here with me in this moment," he would assure her. His tenderness was the only thing tethering Katie from utterly floating away. She noticed Sam becoming more withdrawn and having whispered conversations with someone unseen. She hoped desperately he wasn't succumbing to the madness too. One day, Katie blinked and nightmarishly found herself strapped to a gurney, 4 tubes snaking under restraints. A doctor loomed over her, cooing, "This is for your own good." Katie thrashed violently but could not free herself. A hand grasped Katie's shoulder, jolting her awake in bed, still caught in a tangled web of distortions. Katie broke down, clutching Sam's steady arms, no longer able to discern reality from lies. Chapter 19, The Puppet Master. After endless psychological torments, the contestants were shocked and the lead scientist himself came to address them. "You wanted answers and an end to this experiment. I've come to give you both," he said coolly. He revealed this was a government-funded project to develop methods of complete behavioral control and reprogramming. They had served as his subjects to perfect extracting fears and desires to weaponize against the mind. Why us? Katie asked angrily. Why turn our lives into a twisted game? The scientist described how they had all been specifically selected after profiling showed cracks or traumas that made them more vulnerable to control methods. Even your reward prizes were selected based on unconscious motivations we could manipulate, he said, smiling. Katie felt nauseous realizing she had been targeted and reduced to a lab rat fulfilling this puppet master's vision. He proudly described the control techniques he perfected, drugs, punishments, illusions, that could break even the strongest subjects. I've completed my research. Now we will reset you and send you back with no memory or evidence, he said. Katie wanted to kill this monster, but felt her rage and clarity slipping away as her vision blurred and darkened. She collapsed, realizing he had been drugging them during his speech to subdue any final resistance. As Katie lost consciousness, she swore to cling to the truth and find a way to expose his crimes someday. This scientist may think he's omnipotent, but she refused to keep playing his twisted puppet. Chapter 20, Breaking Down. Katie's spirit was nearly broken after the scientist revealed the full extent of their sick plan. With no recent escape attempts, the contestants shuffled through daily torments in resigned silence. Even lively sparkplugs like Sam sank into gloom, the weight of their indefinite captivity sitting heavier each passing day. He no longer had reassuring words for Katie at night when she slipped into despair. Chris rarely emerged from underneath his blanket anymore. The others learned not to be startled when he erupted into deranged giggles or screams at unseen horrors. Jenny had withdrawn completely into herself, sitting catatonic with hollow eyes. Only Isabella continued seething with directionless rage, threatening to gouge out the cameras. During an illusion cycle, Katie found herself wandering the house aimlessly, no longer remembering why she was here. She spotted a limp body blocking a doorway ahead. As she approached, she saw with dull recognition that it was Dave, who had swallowed the last of his smuggled sedatives to finally escape this prison eternally. Katie knew they were all slowly committing the same suicide in pieces. She lay down apathetically, deciding she was done fighting as the walls warped and melted around her. Just before her eyes sank shut, she thought she heard Sam's voice cut through urgently. Katie, don't give up on me now. We need you. Chapter 21, The Masks Come Off. Katie drifted in a fog of surrender until Sam's voice roused her once again. Slowly his words filtered through, reminding her this was another deception. With Sam's support, Katie struggled back to lucidity. Together, they rallied the others to see through this latest manipulation designed to crush their last bit of hope. They want us to give in so they can mold us into whatever they desire, urged Katie. But we can't let them steal away the people we truly are. She grasped Sam's hand, letting his belief in her kindle her inner flame again. During the next cycle, the contestants pretended to be broken and compliant to set their plan in motion. Isabella lured guards into a compromised area. When they arrived, the contestants ambushed them and stripped them of their uniforms and keycards. Now dressed as guards, the group made their way undetected through restricted areas. They arrived at the control room, catching the scientists off guard. Katie's blood boiled seeing the puppet masters who had sadistically toyed with them. Using the element of surprise, Sam hacked the system to disable security measures and cut video feeds. Chaos quickly erupted in the darkened complex. Now it was the scientists' turn to crumble in confusion as their twisted creations turned on them. A group dragged the lead scientist away as he screamed futilely about his genius being undone. After the contestants secured the compound, Sam restored lights and air systems. Katie embraced him in relief and pride at how they conquered their tormentors. Let's tear off our masks and finally be free, she said. The nightmare was over. Chapter 22, False Hope. After the exhilaration of victory faded, the contestants faced the sobering challenge of finding a way back to reality. Katie wanted to believe Sam could hack through the illusions, but system controls were convoluted and nonsensical. She started noticing inconsistencies again, stairs leading to nowhere, halls looping back on themselves. One day Katie was exploring what looked like an exit when the environment glitched. Suddenly she was in a bright white cell. "No, not again," she screamed as the false reality reasserted itself seamlessly. Sam shook his head despondently when Katie recounted the looping trap. "I thought I could hack our way out, but this whole place is designed to be inescapable," he sighed. The defeated contestants now realized the takeover had only provided fleeting euphoria. They were still helplessly trapped in an endless maze not of their making. Katie's hope drained each time she thought she discovered a promising path only to end up lost in the artificial loop again. She wanted to give up, but knew that's how the puppet masters would win. "They'll keep manipulating our reality however they want until we're empty puppets," she told the others. "This sick game ends only when we say it does." Reunified in defiance, the contestants vowed to keep fighting, even if they couldn't fully trust their senses and escape seemed impossible. This was the only way to take back control of their shattered reality. Chapter 23, The Darkest Hour. After endless failed escape attempts, a soul-crushing despair set in. Sam barely spoke anymore, just stared ahead blankly. The others fared little better. Chris rocked and muttered feverishly, while Jenny tore endlessly at infected self-inflicted wounds. Katie's own hope was nearly extinguished. She had exhausted every theory, every potential exit, all proving to be fanciful dead ends. No matter what they did, the labyrinth would reset seamlessly. Katie couldn't even feel rage anymore, just a hollow resignation. She couldn't recall the last time she had felt sunshine or wind or any sensation unfiltered through this manufactured prison. At their lowest point, crazed from isolation, some of the fractured souls turned on each other just for a spark of feeling. Katie was too weary to intervene in the blackened fights swirling around her. She had nothing left to give anyone, not even herself. Katie rested her head against the cool wall and closed her eyes. She imagined sinking through it, the earth swallowing her to be buried in an eternal peaceful dark. As her breathing slowed, Katie heard urgent cries as if from a distant land. Sam's voice pleaded, "Katie, please, take my hand. I need you here with me." She languidly opened her eyes to see Sam's outstretched hand shaking before her. Beyond it loomed an abyss. With her last ounce of strength, Katie reached out and took hold. Chapter 24, The Final Revelation. Katie allowed Sam's lifeline to slowly pull her back from the void. She had come too far to surrender now when the end was surely near. "We have one last chance to finish this twisted game on our terms," she told the others. "This started with us, and now we're going to end it." Katie knew the key was not resisting or escaping the illusion, but overriding it. She rallied their fractured psyches to unite and exert their collective will to manipulate the environment themselves and regain control. The contestants joined hands, using Sam's clever tricks to hijack the neural feedback loops. At first the walls only shimmered slightly to their touches. But the more minds focused in unison, the more the surroundings responded and transformed. Soon they had torn open an abyss for their captors and reconstructed a bridge to freedom. Katie led the ragged souls towards the light ahead, hoping this final revelation was real. They emerged into the outside world for the first time in endless days and fell to their knees at the sensation of grass under their feet and wind in their hair. Tears flowed at the affirmation that they were finally free. Their captors rushed out in a panic at having lost control of the illusion. But for once, the contestants held all the power now. With heavy hearts, they banished their torturers into the abyss forever. Bathed in sunlight, Katie turned to Sam and smiled. "What shall we make real next?" she asked softly. Their harrowing journey was over, but this awakening and renewal felt like only the beginning.